szorítják a kollektív jogok. Ugyanis egy totalitárius rendszerben valósággal luxusnak tűnik arra gondolni, hogy nekem személy szerint mit szabad, és neked mit szabad még.
László Tőkés.
Taking on the responsibility of a nation for the rights Romanians deserve.
By the late 1980s, Romanian citizens were outraged by Ceausescu's 22-year-long oppressive rule. Young László Tőkés, an ethnically Hungarian pastor preaching in the small town of Timisoara, used his sermons as a platform to contradict the Ceausescu regime. With communism being antagonistic towards religion, the regime did everything in its power to evict Tőkés. This caused an uprising and protests which led to the ultimate collapse of the communist regime in Romania. As time passed, Romania grew into a country with freedom of religion, basic human rights, and power for the people, which catalyzed the communist movement for Romanians and Hungarian minorities.
In the words of Denis Delant's book on Ceausescu and the Securitate, he states, "Police terror is an intrinsic feature of totalitarianism, and the communist rule in Romania confirmed this. Terror was an instrument wielded by all the communist regimes of Eastern Europe as a means of implementing the Marxist and Leninist revolution." The book, Victim of Communism, reads, "Communists wanted to eradicate religion because they believed that faith had the power to influence people's actions, something the communists feared they could not control." Going off the quote from the famous Karl Marx, the father of communism, "Religion is the opium of the people."
The church became full of believers, and a new life, a new church life started, and that was provoking the Romanian and atheist communist authorities.
During the late 1900s, Europe experienced a rise in communist rule known as the Iron Curtain. After World War II ended, many European countries found themselves oppressed under the newfound communist rule of the Soviet Union. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 was partly driven by the rapid implementation of reforms, including political and economic changes aimed at revitalizing the stagnating economy, known as perestroika, meaning restructuring in Russian, and was introduced by President Mikhail Gorbachev. Nicolae Ceausescu was considered the Hitler of Romania and originally started as a political figure but quickly rose to the top. László Tőkés took a stand and fought for the freedom and rights their country had been waiting for since World War II.
László Tőkés, a Hungarian-Romanian pastor, grew up in Cluj-Napoca, Romania, in the Transylvania region. He was born there on April 1, 1952. The region his family lived in was mainly Hungarian-speaking with a primarily Hungarian population. Tőkés described it as a region with rich fields and strikingly beautiful mountains, innumerable villages, and several historic cities. Tőkés came from a poor family of 10. His father once expressed his regret for not being able to buy flowers when Tőkés was born. The family was deeply religious, and Tőkés couldn't recall a time when he wasn't a Christian. As a teenager, he rebelled, upsetting his mother by breaking a promise to become a pastor, but later he realized it was his true calling and decided to pursue it. As László Tőkés got older, he became increasingly popular in the church and eventually pastored his own in Timisoara.
In the early 1980s, Nicolae Ceausescu started to take away the rights of the Romanian people after succeeding Gheorghe Mara as prime minister. He consolidated his power and confirmed his control over the state when he became president in 1967. He established a totalitarian state and had all control over the politics. He saw it as his job to reform Romania and make it into what he considered the perfect society. Ceausescu only promoted atheism, and the rights they had for religion were stripped away from them. Small businesses were destroyed, and the police system was corrupted by the secret police, or what they called the Securitate. Hungarian minorities were being forced out of the country, and their villages were being burned to the ground due to Ceausescu's most famous policy, which was called the Systemization Plan. The Systemization Plan aimed to demolish rural villages, relocate populations to urban centers, and standardize the country's architecture to enforce centralized control and modernization, often at the expense of cultural heritage and local identity. Freedom of religion was strictly forbidden, and the only acceptable practice was atheism. On December 1st, 1989, László Tőkés, the pastor of the Hungarian Reformed Church, began to hold sermons at his church and spoke out against the communist regime. He advocated for the rights of the Hungarian minorities, and tensions started to rise between his congregation and the government authorities. In an attempt to silence Tőkés, the secret police watched his home, listened to everything they said, and sent spies into his church to listen for anything that could be considered treason.
We were living in fear. The whole population was deeply intimidated.
He continued to speak out, and on December 15, 1989, László Tőkés and his wife were forcefully evicted from their home and transported to a small remote town called Miniu. A week before he was taken, he relayed the eviction to his church, saying, "Dear brothers and sisters in Christ," Tőkés announced, "I have been issued a summons of eviction. I will not accept it, so I will be taken from you by force next Friday. They want to do this in secret because they have no right to do it." This outraged the Romanian people, and this protest supporting Tőkés quickly grew, with thousands in Timișoara demanding his return and rising against the regime. Ceausescu sent troops to suppress the protest, and they opened fire, killing thousands.
Free of communism, and in single voice we say we don't want communism, and we want to be free, and we want democracy here.
As protests spread, Ceausescu's attempt to address the people in Bucharest was interrupted by more protests. Nicolae Ceausescu's strong-built cult of personality was quickly crumbling before his eyes when Professor Thornton was interviewed, recalling the Romanian Revolution. During Ceausescu's reign, thousands of people who criticized his regimes were imprisoned and assassinated. I was watching his speech live on TV. Suddenly I heard a noise coming from the crowd. It was not cheering, it was booing. Ceausescu was startled. The cameraman could not hold the camera still anymore. In a few seconds, the screen of the TV went black. The last dictator of Eastern Europe was going down. By December 20th, 1989, Timișoara was declared a free city, and the protests spread nationwide. With little support left, Ceausescu and his wife fled in a helicopter, hoping to take refuge in Austria, but it was shot down and they were arrested. On December 25, 1989, they were tried, found guilty, and executed by a firing squad. After the execution, they were examined and covered with a canvas, and it was estimated that they both had over 100 bullet wounds. It was done quickly because they feared few loyalists would attempt to rescue them. The execution involved 8 soldiers, and it took place so quickly that the television crew missed the start but was able to capture the aftermath on tape. After a few days later, they were buried in Bucharest, Romania.
"I still get nervous talking about this," Iono Boyer states when he recalls that cold Christmas day. Even though the Ceausescus were gone, he still felt frightful about going against communism, having been oppressed by them his entire life. It was later released that Ceausescu's charges were genocide, the offense of public property and buildings, undermining the national economy of Romania, and using over $1 billion for foreign deposits. When the news reached László Tőkés that the Romanians had taken over the capital, he rejoiced and recalled it in an interview.
When I learned that Ceausescu had fallen, that was the happiest moment of my life. I never imagined that joy like that could be possible.
From that time period to the 2000s, Romania relapsed and had a collapse in their banking system, but re-elected a coalition government. After battles with the police and the banking system that were still corrupt from communism, Romania established a secure government. Eventually, they became stable enough to support the U.S. following the 9/11 attacks on September 11, 2001, and they gave funds while supporting the country. Romania started to become more closely associated with the West, and after going through different political periods, they joined NATO in 2004, became members of the EU in 2007, and on March 31, 2024, the Schengen area was finalized, granting a border-free zone between Bulgaria and Romania. The advocacy of László Tőkés not only played a crucial role in promoting religious freedom, but also minority rights, paving the way for the country's first democratic election and a new constitution as a country.
László Tőkés, the man with the heart and responsibility to defend the human rights of the Romanians, commented on the words from one of his dearest friends.
In the Vargas home, Margaret, standing by the window, turned on the radio and heard the news. "Mummy," demanded her small daughter, "why are you crying?" "Because communism is over," she replied. The execution of the dictator had seemed unthinkable, and the news came as a devastating shock to many who had dreamed of such an event for years. But the brief, numbing horror soon gave way to rejoicing.